Where and when are you playing?
So the Dodgers Stadium on Saturday, August the 4th, and the whole thing kicks off at 6:30 p.m.
Now, the whole thing includes not only, of course, you guys headlining this show, which is going to sell out like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, our guests on the whole tour, Nights of Ebb, who are opening for us everywhere. We managed to get them over finally this time. And we've got some special guests playing Electronic, the band Electronic, featuring a couple of guys from the Pet Shop Boys who are going to be doing a couple of songs with them as well.
Wow, so it's going to be Electronic with Johnny Marr from X of the Smiths. That's and right, Bernard Sumner, who's on kind of hiatus right now.
Yeah.
And also the Pet Shop Boys special guest appearance. This is going to be one hell of a lineup. I mean, the Pet Shop Boys have never played live.
Well, no, they've done a tour. They've done a tour recently.
Well, I mean, not in America.
Oh,
I mean,
no, they've done
no.
I mean,
the rest of the world.
Not Electronic haven't. I mean, it's just, I think they're putting together an album and stuff, and the album's probably coming out about that time, so that, you know, we got in touch with them and asked them if they'd like to do it, and they thought about it for a while, I think, and then they came back to us and said, yeah, they definitely wanted to do it, so it'd be really good. I think it's a great, really good bill.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And it is Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice, after taking a week off for my summer vacation, back to talk about the boys from Basildon and the greatest band on the face of the planet. As always, if you'd like to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or if you happen to be enjoying this up on YouTube, you can leave a comment there. So I played that clip going back to an interview that the band did with DJ and host on K-Rock Radio in Los Angeles, Richard Blade, going back to that famous Dodger Stadium show, which I was privileged and blessed to be at. I had 10th row seats for, I believe, both of the nights for that show. Interestingly enough, thinking back or reflecting back on that show, you know, you wonder if those Dodger Stadium shows would have been held in as high regard and significance in terms of the band's history and touring legacy if it hadn't been for the Rose Bowl show. I mean, playing at Dodger Stadium and selling out 2 nights there, I mean, that's a huge feat in and of itself. I mean, obviously, the Rose Bowl and the 101 show was, and this following on the heels of that just a handful of years later. You don't hear much talk about those particular shows in terms of the band's history, but I would argue that they actually carry quite a bit of a significance. Certainly not as big as the Rose Bowl show, but for those of us living in Southern California at the time, that was a major deal. And again, the Rose Bowl show kind of overshadowed it, but when you consider the apex of the band and the band reaching its apex, those Dodger Stadium shows were incredibly significant, which also brings me to a rumor that I wanted to share with you on this week's episode. So we'll talk about this. I'm going to provide some rampant speculation, of which I have no knowledge of whatsoever, just a thought, given the rumor that I have been hearing. And then we'll also get to your listener feedback. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And again, if you're enjoying this up on YouTube, you can leave a comment there. So first off, let's talk about first this wild rumor that I have been told. So we still don't have any official information regarding when later this year Depeche Mode's film M, that debuted in June at the Tribeca Film Festival, will be released, nor those 4 unreleased tracks of which we believe we have titles for now. However, I did have a fan reach out to me who said that according to what they were told, somebody and it's kind of a game of telephone, so, you know, I like to share these. These are all rumors. Take it with a grain of salt. But from what they have been told, a fan had a lengthy conversation with the director of the Depeche Mode film, M, Fernando Frias. And in that conversation, the director told them that there was a tour in the works for the future, that the band would be touring some point again in the future. Now, that's all the information that I have regarding this. This is just what I've been told. And I've actually heard this from a couple of different sources. Now, whether or not this is the same source and it's just reached other people remains to be seen. So it got me thinking, all right, if the band were going to tour again, how would the director of the documentary be aware of this, especially since there is absolutely no discussion as far as we fans are concerned about Martin and Dave going back into the studio, and typically that's when the tour talk ends up, starting. Once we know the band is working on a new album, and you have to assume that a tour will be attached to that, unless you're going back and considering what the band did and breaking from tradition because of all the turmoil at the time in the run-up to the release of Ultra. It also got me thinking about these unreleased Memento Mori tracks that I've been told we will be getting in promotion of the film. Certainly In the End being one of those, but you have Life 2.0 and the other two tracks. And that got me wondering, well, what if it's already been decided that the band is planning on putting together and releasing another singles compilation, which would be the singles 01 to 2023. Now listen, it makes all the sense in the world. I've been catching up with Depeche Mode, pun intended, via some YouTube videos, and specifically the MTV abbreviated professional footage of the singles tour, of which I had traveled at the time with my then girlfriend to Manchester, England, to go and see that show going back to 1998. So the band has done this before. We haven't had a full, proper singles release since the previous singles release, which only covered until 1998. So it would make an abundance of sense for the band, especially if Dave and Martin were potentially eyeing the end. That maybe, and I hate to look at it this way, but you never know. Maybe there's already talk of, hey, maybe we don't make another album, but we already have some tracks in the can if we don't get all of those 4 unreleased tracks. Much in the same way we ended up getting some singles in the form of Only When I Lose Myself, and then also the B-side of Surrender with the release of the prior singles album. And then the tour that followed, maybe Dave and Martin decide, hey, we're going to actually do a tour in support of the singles 01 to 2023. So with that, I went ahead and I grabbed the list of all the tracks that they could go and pull from. And as a matter of fact, it ends up creating a 25-track set list, assuming that the band went with all of the singles that have been released since 2001 to 2023. Now, as we have gone through on the show in recent episodes and put together our dream set lists, this would be incredibly interesting considering the fact that most of their major hits wouldn't be played on this tour. I could envision something on a smaller scale or a paring down of a greatest hits tour that maybe included the entire catalog but focused focused the majority of the tracks on the singles from 2001 to 2023. Personally, I think it would be really interesting, and I would definitely be into a tour that only consisted of songs and singles that are the singles from 01 to 2023, simply because a lot of these tracks just simply haven't been given, and I'm using simply a lot, my apologies. I've done a lot of radio today, so I just think it would be really interesting to see a show like this that didn't include all of the hits that came before it. Now, before I run through the list here, I know many of you could probably rattle off all the singles off the top of your head, but I thought it might be fun to go ahead and go through all of these and talk a little bit about some of these tracks. There's a part of me, because I've been thinking about this a lot since I kind of came up with the idea to go here this week, especially after hearing the rumor about a potential tour in the future. But it's interesting to me because I'd almost like to see a singles release starting with Ultra, marking the end of when Alan left through now. That being said, there's already the connectivity to the previous singles release, as Ultra was obviously included in that. But at the same time, too, Ultra, to me, did signal the end of that particular era, even if it didn't include Alan, and Alan leaving was could be more of a point of the band's history where you would say this is the beginning of the new era. Ultra, to me, and how it was recorded, what the band was going through, Dave coming out of his addiction, the album they weren't even sure they were going to create. There was no proper tour attached to it. And then the larger tour with the singles release. I completely understand that being the point of the sort of the marker that one would put in the band's timeline, and everything starting fresh and new with Exciter. Even though you could make an argument that Alan would be the decisive marker for when the band sort of restarted. So I hope that makes sense. I was kind of wrestling with this a bit. You know, what is sort of, if you split the Depeche Mode era up just in half, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The natural stopping point would be ending with the last single release of Songs of Faith and Devotion. However, looking chronologically at the band's history, the real natural stopping point is Ultra being the last full album released with the singles tour, and then a complete and total reset with Exciter. And what's interesting to me looking at it from that lens is that starting with Exciter, we end up getting, you know, these albums that I know a lot of fans pitched off on as the years went on. There's a segment of the fandom that really only focuses on the Alan era. But that era from Exciter up until now, I mean, it expands a longer period of time than the time prior to the band's inception, starting with Speak and Spell. And an incredibly eclectic mix of albums and styles, which, coming full circle back to a potential new tour focusing on the singles from 01 to 2023, actually creates a wide variety, and maybe even a wider variety, in terms of the selection of tracks that we could go and get on tour. I know it's convoluted. I hope I'm making sense. Usually one of you emails me and says, I got and understood what you were trying to say. So let's run through the list of the songs they can choose from. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the songs that I would absolutely pitch off on and the songs that I would absolutely include. So when you start with Exciter, you go with Dream On, Free Love, I Feel Loved, and Goodnight Lovers. The only one of those songs that I would potentially pitch away would be Goodnight Lovers, except for the fact that that would be a really good closer, as they've used it before on previous tours. When you get into playing The Angel, you've got a nice set of tracks, all of which would make the set list, in my opinion. Precious, A Pain That I'm Used To, go back to the original version. Suffer Well, John the Revelator, of course, that was on the most recent tour, and I could see them making an excuse to not play it on a modern era singles tour, for lack of a better way to describe it, simply because of its inclusion on the Memento Mori tour. What I would substitute, though, is the one-off single from those sessions of Martyr, which my understanding is the band expected that to be a much more popular track than what it was, but it is a song that I very much enjoy and listen to quite often. When you get into Sounds of the Universe, Wrong, Peace, and Fragile Tension, I know Hold to Feed was included in that Fragile Tension Hold to Feed, but I've just pitched it off. I'm not even going to include it. I mean, here, definitely Wrong, but again, its inclusion in recent tours, I think, could make an argument not to include it. Peace, I would love to see played live. Don't need to see Fragile Tension. I enjoyed the track, but it's not one that I have any desire to go and see live. When you get into the singles coming off of Delta Machine, Heaven, Soothe My Soul, and Should Be Higher. Listen, I can take or leave all three of those tracks being played live. Heaven, perhaps as a mid-set list solo, slowing things down or coming out of Martin's solos. Should be higher. I've expressed my frustration with that song and Dave's high-pitched moments that just don't work for me. Soothe My Soul could be a good one to include live. When you get into Spirit, Where's the Revolution, Going Backwards, Cover Me. The one track there that I could potentially see pitching off to include maybe an older track on a modern era Depeche Mode tour would be Where's the Revolution, only because that song didn't work live, in my opinion. It was a track that actually really surprised me. It's a song that I enjoy, and I thought it was a really strong lead-in single for Spirit and had my hopes up incredibly high for that album. That being said, I was surprised at just how well it didn't go over during the Global Spirit tour. Well, and then what's interesting is you get into Delta Machine, and they released a lot of singles. So, Ghosts Again, My Cosmos Is Mine, Wagging Tongue, Speak to Me, My Favorite Stranger, Before We Drown, and People Are Good. Ghosts Again is an instant inclusion, but if the band were looking to add in songs pre-2001, I would be okay with the pitching off of any of the other tracks simply because we would have seen them most recently on Memento Mori, except for People Are Good. Because that's a song that I think would have worked very well live. And I was really disappointed that the band did not include that in the most recent tour. So, again, and I'd like to see a completely new set of compilations. And maybe they could even go back and just redo all of them again. Maybe start off, if the band is looking towards the end, at a bare minimum, give us a singles release on par with the original singles releases. The re-release of the Catching Up With here in the U.S., but of course the greatest hit so far that was released going back to the 80s, prior to the secondary singles release that went through 98. They could release a series of albums that cover the entire catalog, but at a bare minimum, give us 2001 to 2023. What are your thoughts on this? I'd love to hear any variations that you have regarding, your thoughts around this, but this seems like a logical, if that rumor was true, this seems the most logical reason why there's even any talk of a future tour in the next year or two outside of a new album being created. So, again, as always, what are your thoughts? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com or leave a comment up on YouTube. Speaking of your comments, let's go ahead and get to them this morning. Well, I say this morning. I'm recording this podcast in the morning. It's only 11:30 here. And I'm used to doing my weekly radio show, which takes place in the morning, which is why I said that. First off, let's hear from Jon, who writes this. A few words from me on marketing and Depeche Mode, which was the focus of the most recent podcast. I was never a huge fan of Fletch. I mostly saw him as Martin's mate who didn't have much to do at concerts, so he was just clapping along. We all saw Von George's brilliant analysis of Andy's role in the concerts, so I know my assumption may not be fair, but I can't shake the feeling. After the disastrous press conference for Memento Mori, I had an aha moment with Andy Fletcher gone. Depeche Mode had lost their marketing guru. In my opinion, Andy's absence explains all those quirky moments we witnessed after the release of Memento Mori. Take it or leave it. You know what, Jon? That's a really good point and one I hadn't thought of, and I tend to agree with you. I think that Fletch really handled that aspect of it, and the promotion for Memento Mori certainly got better as time went along, especially when Dave and Martin were out doing their interviews with various podcasts. But you're right, the initial rollout in that first interview with whoever that host was such a complete and utter disappointment. Next up, we hear from Javier. So Javier writes this, talking about misheard lyrics. Prior to the internet or physical record releases, I remember watching world premieres for I Feel You and Barrel of a Gun and feverishly writing down the apparent lyrics. Did Dave just say, "This is the morning of Allah"? Has Martin turned Muslim? Or I'm longing for some rest in Vietnam from Barrel of a Gun. Not my first choice for a destination looking for relaxation and rest. In the spirit of Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy from Purple Haze or Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza, Elton John, let me know if anything comes to mind for the Basilton Boys. Thank you, JJ Javier. So, yes, as a matter of fact, I do have those. So first off, my misheard lyric was in Barrel of a Gun when I thought that they were saying, I never agreed to be your hole in one. I thought it was a golfing reference. Here's the one that I still cannot figure out. And I think I've talked about this on the show, but I don't think that but part of me thinks that I haven't because I would have gotten an answer. I still cannot figure out how Dave sings in Walking in My Shoes, but the Lord himself would blush. Every time I hear that song, live or the recorded version, and I've even tried to slow it down, it sounds like Dave is saying, but the Lord himself, would blush, or something to that effect. I've even tried to sing it, but the Lord himself would blush. But I feel every time I listen to it, I hear an extra word in there. But the Lord himself would blush. If somebody can help me out, and please tell me so that I can switch what I'm hearing in my brain. Because it sounds like there's something between would and blush that I've never been able to fix in my head. And I've been desperate to hear it a different way so that I can hear the song correctly. I know it's, but the Lord himself would blush. But I always hear, but the Lord himself would... So I won't torture you with my horrible singing anymore. But if you can help me, I greatly appreciate it. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, next up, we have Leia, Dave Gahan Enjoyer from Niagara Falls, Canada, who writes this. Here's a little news from DM for the German devotees. Depeche Mode Every Album, Every Song is now available in German. Another highlight is the new edition with new chapters of the Martin Gore biography, Insight, which will be released in September. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. This is actually coming from Stephanie in the Baltic Sea. The next one's up. I read too far down. This is from friend of the show, Stephanie. She goes on to say, that's it from me. Have a great summer, everyone. I hope you and your family are doing well. Best wishes from the Baltic Sea. So, for German devotees, Depeche Mode Every Album, Every Song is now available in German, and there's new chapters in the Martin Gore biography of Insight released in September. So, this is from Leia, the Dave Gahan Enjoyer from Niagara Falls, who writes this. Listening to the June 25th pod about DM's lack of PR, this has always been puzzling to me. The band has official social media pages that only get updated when something major is happening in their camp. We keep the spirit alive through fan pages, etc., but this is a multi-million album-selling band. I think they have a few bucks to spend on promotion of the movie. Maybe Tribeca's promo is enough for them. And give us fans some crumbs here and there between tours and releases. I'm sure you agree. Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see if the promotion machine picks up for the film, but I mean, we're heading into the middle of July. August, September, October. We're hearing a potential November release for this. So, again, I don't want to repeat everything I said on the most recent podcast. She goes on to say, I don't think it's due to a lack of finances that they didn't do any promotion yet for the movie, unless you mean the budget for that movie in and of itself. I've seen so many official band pages post regularly, whether it be a message from band members, contests, news, vintage throwback clips. Why can't DM be more like that? Anything to engage would be great. Thanks for your time. And then she also goes and posts her Instagram page, which I'm not sure she wants me to share with everybody on the podcast, but Leia, the Dave Gahan enjoyer. You could probably find it via that if you wanted to. From Niagara Falls, Canada. Thank you so much for the comment. You know, my gut tells me, relating to the lack of promotion around the band, is the Instagram page I know recently put up another charity promo relating to their charity around water and water conservation. I just think that the circle around the band has shrunk. And I know there's individuals like Brat and others that have been in charge of some of these things in the past, but you know, nowadays bands just don't have the infrastructure like they did before. So if there's nobody dedicated at the label for band promotion, there may just be a handful of things that the label decides they want to do, and any sort of constant promotion of the band just is kind of non-existent, since you don't really know what the band is going to be doing in the future, and so therefore the label may look at it like, well, you know, there's no point in going promoting the band if the band's not going to be progressing moving forward. So it's kind of a pessimistic view. I just don't think that there's anybody dedicated to doing any sort of regular promotion for the band beyond the releases of the singles box sets, which are all but pretty much done with. So, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment up on YouTube. Lastly, if you enjoy science fiction, I hope you'll take a moment, support the podcast, and check out my science fiction series, EMBARK. A fast, fun, action-packed, epic science fiction adventure without an agenda. After Earth faces its end, you'll follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their ragtag crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. Set in the year 2172 on Earth, where air and spaceflight culture has replaced car culture, life in the so-called space age, the world we live in, and life in general, Depeche Mode plays a large part in the underlying themes of the stories, and the protagonist in the story, Taft Guardia, is a massive fan of Depeche Mode at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s and now is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story, and it features both direct and indirect references to Depeche Mode and other bands of the era that I enjoy, and you do too, all while telling a sprawling, exciting science fiction space opera saga. Buy EMBARK Book 1 today if you like your science fiction to be epic, filled with romance, action, and EMBARK is perfect for you, written for adults but completely age-appropriate for those 11 years old and older. Available on Amazon.com. Just search for Jon Justice and EMBARK. Available in hardcover, paperback, audiobook, ebook, and Kindle Unlimited.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
Depeche Mode, the podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with the show this week. I look forward to hearing from you, and until then, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. God bless. And I'll talk to you devotees very soon. Bye.